Hi everybody, and welcome to today's Q&A, which is all about how to negotiate money in the world of content. And we're going to be covering both freelance rate negotiations and in-house salary negotiations. And we're joined by a bunch of awesome content marketers. So we've got Louise Shanahan, Emma Cownley, James Garnier and Veronika Vēbere, who I will let introduce themselves properly in a moment. In terms of the format of today's session, we're going to split it loosely into two parts. The first half will be about in-house negotiations and the second half freelance. So I've got some questions that some of you submitted before. I'll also ask my own, but if you've got any as we go, just pop them into the chat box or the Q&A box. So now I will pass over to the panelists just to say a brief 10-second introduction, and then we'll kick off the questions. So Louise, I'll start with you from the top part of my screen.
Oh, thank you. Well, hello, I am Louise Shanahan and I am a freelance health copywriter. So as you can probably guess, that means that I mostly work with health and medical companies. I mostly write white papers, bit of long form content, bit of website copywriting sprinkled in there. And I'm also the host of the 15-Minute Freelancer podcast, which is a mix of my own musings and interviews with other freelancers about the ups and downs of freelancing.
Awesome. Thanks, Louise. And Emma, hello.
Hey, I'm Emma Cownley. I'm a freelance copywriter for music, fashion and lifestyle. I've been freelance for about 5 years, and I tend to do more emails, blogging, web copy, and I also, on occasion, host a YouTube series called Kiss My A's, where I answer freelance questions.
And it's very funny. It's a good mix of being educational and hilarious at the same time.
Yeah, cat interruptions galore over there.
And James, hey.
Hi everyone, I'm James. I've been in marketing for about 2 years now. Marketing manager. I recently made marketing manager role, creating new landing pages for the company website. And I've now moved into a more generalist role to handle multiple channels, but I still think of myself as a sort of diehard content manager at the core, hiding in sheep's clothing to keep everyone on the straight and narrow.
Content at heart for life. That's good. And Veronika, hey.
Hey everyone, Veronika, content forever and always. So share that with you, James. I am an in-house head of demand generation at a martech company. I started in content marketing, I would say as a part-time marketer for a retail brand over 10 years ago. So quite a long way, and built my way up, becoming more and more specialized up until getting into my true passion as marrying marketing with generating growth and sales. Yeah, I guess that's all I'm going to say. Hoping to answer some of your questions today and help you out with your help you on your path to getting a lot of money. That's what I want to say.
Good path to be on. Well, thanks for introducing yourselves, everyone. We will start off jumping into chat about in-house salary negotiations. Louise and Emma, I know you're on the freelance side, but feel free to chime in and answer some of these as well. So I'll start with some of the ones I've got here. So have you got any examples of how you've prepared for a salary negotiation, and what did that process look like? Start with you, Veronika.
Yeah, it's happened quite a few times for different roles, but I would say that the first thing that you need to start thinking about is how you become not just a contributor that pushes out a certain amount of content every week or month, but you start to think about how that connects to business initiatives, broader projects, just general business goals. You need to start thinking about how that one thing that you do today is actually contributing to the growth of the business. You don't have to be able to figure it all out. You can ask your manager to help you on the way of figuring it out. But yeah, that's like the first step that you need to take. And then in terms of the second step would be actually doing the ask and talking about those conversations. So some companies, they have this yearly performance review or biannual performance review where you definitely want to bring all of the things that you've accomplished, all of the things you've learned, all of the things that you also want to do. Like generally managers and leaders are looking for how you're going to help them move the needle. And if you can answer that question with content or with whatever you want to do, that's the first step to negotiating a bigger salary, because you need to show that you can provide value first.
So when you've done that previously, Veronika, are you noting down how you're adding value for like a period of time before you then have that discussion, and how long in advance before you make the ask do you tend to do that planning?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I would tell you to note down all of your successes every single time that they happen, but in reality, that never happens. Like that performance review comes up and you're like, shoot, what have I done? So my suggestion to you would be to, before you even start talking to your manager about what salary you want, or even thinking about the value you provide, like figure out what you want to do in your real life. Like if you're a content writer, you could become a content strategist or an editor, then eventually a content marketing manager, then maybe, then you can become, head of content someday. So you need to figure out what it is that you want to do, or maybe you want to go my way where you kind of marry content with growth, and you want to go, you want to approach it from there, or you want to become a mentor, you want to be a marketing manager, and you want to just climb that way. So you need to make that decision too, but just because when you have that in your mind, you can start taking on tasks that are in relation to that. And then you can talk to your manager and say, hey, like these are my career aspirations, this is where I want to go. I think that there's a space for that in the company. I'm actually already doing a couple of things. What do you think? Is that somewhere where you see value? How can I help you? Like just asking a lot of questions instead of being like, I want this promotion and I want more money. Like make it more of a dialogue with your manager and see how you can help them. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of framing it. It's starting with like the ideal place you want to get to as the first step, and then working your way towards that and adding value on the way. That's nice. Yeah. And James, what about you? were you going to say something there?
I was going to add something. I mean, probably related to the question you're about to ask me, but I think Veronika's kind of touched on it, which is in a bid to get the salary you want, there are kind of a few moments you can ask. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of the ask, because that is a question that might come up later, but more on how you prepare or how you go into it, because you can either get an opportunity to increase your salary in a performance review, which is usually on a regular basis booked in by your company, but you could also have an opportunity when you get promoted. Promotions don't automatically come with salary increases. You sometimes have to negotiate for those too. And then thirdly, just if you feel underpaid, you might get to a point where you're thinking, I'm adding a lot of value in my role here. It's expanded, or I've made it bigger than it was already. I'm not being paid enough. I'm not going to get promotion, but I think the time has come for me to push my salary up. So I think obviously the easiest ones when you get promoted and when it's a performance review, but I think don't hold yourself back if you feel like you're being underpaid. It's not. It's actually a possibility to push for that meeting with your manager and ask for an increase.
And how have you had that experience before, where you've had to ask for a pay rise when it's not been like the time you're supposed to, and how have you approached that?
Yeah, I have at Yieldify, where I am at the moment. My manager is the CEO, so I called a meeting with him saying, can I talk about my value to the company? So it wasn't like I sprung it on him as a surprise. I think that's kind of like a sensible way, and I don't take credit for that phraseology myself. I think I found it on a Reddit post. It's like the hint, I'm talking about money, but I'm not going to use the word money. Everyone knows what you're on about. It doesn't take anyone by surprise. Obviously, the prerequisite is that you need to come with results. As Veronika said, you need to have achievements that you've built up. So focus on results and value, not effort. I have a kudos folder. I don't really fill it up as often as I used to, but I used to try to kind of save feedback and testimonials and just positive feedback that I've received. Even if you don't refer to it, it can feel kind of like a confidence boost going to that conversation, because you know that you have achieved things that other colleagues have appreciated. And then obviously also, if project XYZ has done extremely well because of your input, spell that out. Yeah, go on.
Have you got any examples in terms of proving results from content? What sort of things do you think are good in these conversations when it comes to content marketing, proving the difference?
Yeah, I mean, depending on your KPIs, if you have KPIs set, that's obviously amazing. We are very conversion focused at Yieldify. So through SEO, if you are responsible for bottom of the funnel posts, which have driven, a 10% lift in conversions year on year or quarter on quarter, that's obviously like a gold star. It could even be, I was involved for 6 months on the website relaunch. So there were no results. I didn't actually have any data to show that the website has now increased traffic or conversions because it just went live at the point I wanted to increase my salary. But the very fact that I wrote 30 landing pages, you can enumerate something. It often has a bigger clout than just saying, I've done loads of writing, or this project is now complete. If you can spell it out in a bit more detail, then I think it's also more persuasive.
Yeah, that's a nice idea to enumerate and package what you've done, even if you don't always have the numbers of like conversion rates throughout an early start, for example. Yeah. Awesome. And so let's move on to when it comes to what is a good salary. Like, how do you know what your worth is and what you should be asking for? Veronika, or again, Louise and Emma as well, if you want to chime in at any point. If you do.
Yeah, that's the big difficult question, right? Especially that there's much less information online on in-house roles than freelance. Like, at least like you can search someone's website and see what they're charging for their like freelance stuff as a like starting point, but you can't really do that unless you have Content UK, where you could have those conversations. So become a member and we can tell you. But yeah, no, I think like a good point obviously to start. I mean, okay, so my manager, Nico, he's now VP of Growth, but he's really great. And he told me about this, and he's an amazing negotiator. When you work at the same company, you can never ask for more than 15%. I mean, unless you're at like, if you're going for a huge, big role shift and whatever, you can ask for 20%. That's it. That's the absolute top. Like, that's the step, right? That's why a lot of people hop jobs to get a bigger number. But usually you would get 5, 10, like 15 would be an amazing day. So you always work off what your base salary is regardless, like when you're in an in-house role and you're asking for a promotion, unless you think you're terribly, severely underpaid and you need to, you can threaten them with leaving and basically tell them that this company, that's also, by the way, this is a little bit off topic, but like one way to figuring out what you're worth is actually interviewing with other companies, getting an offer and coming back to your employer and saying, look, I really want to stay, but I'm severely underpaid. This company is willing to pay me 1.5 times more or whatever the number. Can you match it? And if you're okay with that kind of, a little bit of a threat in some cases, then that's fine. But yeah, I guess I'm going quite a bit roundabout about this, but look at the industry reports, look at what people are generally, like there are websites like for UK and US where you can look at different benchmarks for the salaries. Usually you'd want to land somewhere in the middle, ask around, see if you can ask anyone who's maybe working in a similar space or in a similar industry. We know in some industries, content is much better paid, right? So, MarTech, FinTech, those are industries where you can make more money with content than a small bridal shop. So, they can only pay you that much. They can't pay you more because that's just not the main way how they get business. So I would say, look at the benchmarks, have candid conversations with your manager in terms of the salary range, what are you thinking, what you think would be fair, or what kind of increase you're looking for. And yeah, if like all fails and you really want to stay at the job, but you just don't think they're paying you fairly, have a look around and see what other companies would offer for your experience to get that confidence up, to have that conversation with your manager.
Yeah, I would agree with what Veronika says. I actually take a different approach from percentage. So I don't take the percentage approach because I think it can be misleading sometimes. And I actually did a capital example, and you want 10% increase, you go to 49.5, let's call it 50K. The risk of doing that is that you actually don't take into account your post-tax increase. So a 45 to 50K increase actually only leaves you with £250 extra a month, which is not nothing, but it might feel like more if you think I'm getting a 10% increase. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. There's multiple approaches to doing this. I think the second one is also budgeting, like work out what you need, what's your minimum that you can survive on, and then what's your ideal. So that's kind of like personal application to a professional question, and then work out what's feasible. Veronika's already touched on that. LinkedIn, I used to think was a good resource, but actually so many LinkedIn ads don't show you what the salary is, but recruitment agencies usually do. So I've often, scoured 10, 20 different recruitment agencies just to get a sense of what a similar role is paying. You can also sometimes, when you get reached out to by recruitment agencies and they don't give you the salary, often if you ask for the budget, the recruiter will tell you. I often frame it as budget because it somehow seems less money focused. It's more about the company's problem, it's not your interest. So that's like how to think about how much you might want. And I think something that I often forget, and maybe we all forget, is that it's not just about the salary. So if you can't get the goal salary you want. Maybe you can get something else which is valuable to you, like more holiday, agree a KPI bonus. You could get a new job title, which isn't technically a promotion, but it might look good on your CV or on LinkedIn. In my negotiation for this role initially at Yieldify, I had a very structured negotiation where I had my what I want to get. They didn't offer me that initially, so I slid down £1,000 and I said, okay, can you offer me this? And we kept on going until we agreed the value. And then I said, okay, well, we've agreed that. How about the holiday? How about the pension? I wanted to squeeze everything out I could, because that's the opportunity you get, and make the most of it. So I think that's something to remind everyone of, don't just stop at the salary. There are other ways that you can get remunerated.
Yeah, excellent tips there from both of you. But really actionable, practical ways to approach that. And once you've then got a figure in mind, when you have to go and have that conversation with your boss, how do you approach the scary ask, that awkward money conversation when you're having that negotiation? Veronika, any tips around that?
Great tips, James. Yeah, if you don't ask, you don't get, pretty much. So my biggest tip for you is that once you have the ideal number, increase it by 20% or something, because they will never give you, if you work in an amazing company that earns a lot of money and they don't care and you're amazing, of course they might give you the exact number, but then you probably under ask. So be careful when the company gives you exactly what you ask for. Sometimes it could be that they had budgeted a lot more, or that they had budgeted a bit more, but you just asked the number. So in negotiation, really the person who exposes the number is the one. So there is a little bit of a dance there where you have to talk about ranges and what that could look like. And as James said, what is the total package? But in terms of the talk, I think it's really important that it doesn't come out of the blue for your manager or the person you're discussing this with. Generally, managers are much happier when you help them and not burden them with difficult decisions. I've had an example at my previous job where there was a colleague that was just going at, she wanted the promotion because it was really important for her, but there were so many other business opportunities, and what she was doing wasn't really contributing to the business in as of a meaningful way. So it was wrong timing. Ask for it in 3 months and you might get it, but get your timing right. So basically get the number, up it. Yeah. So, and then say that the range is even bigger than that, because they'll give you less. When you discuss this with your manager, pick a really good time and make sure that it's expected and it's talking about growth, and they already know that this is something that you're going to be discussing with them. And then finally, just have a couple of bullet points that you want to touch on. Just say, focus on the positives. This is me, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to go in my career. I see how I can still help grow this brand in 3 ways. Just pick the 3, right? I think what I need is, maybe it's a team or maybe you need some extra resources in addition to what you're asking for, especially if it's a new position. And I think this would be a fair remuneration. Have that written down, because you'll just get nervous and you'll just start talking about it. And the less you say, literally the less you say, and this is very hard for me because I am not a very articulate person. It's very hard for me to be short, but literally have bullet points, talk through the bullet points, and just be comfortable with the silence. The first person who breaks the silence is the one that loses, right? So just be silent and let them answer. Doesn't matter how uncomfortable it gets. Try and do an exercise with your feet or something, but don't say anything after you do the pitch. That would be my couple of points.
That is an excellent tip about saying nothing. It's the most uncomfortable silence on the planet. You just have to sit through it. And Jodie's just said, by the way, great point, to allow your manager to feel prepared for the conversation. Yeah, really good approach. What about you, James?
Yeah,
how do you go about that?
I can sympathize with that experience of holding the silence. And in my notes, which I do, I have a very meticulous script for these conversations. I've written hold the silence or pause, literally telling myself, don't say anything. And I had a meeting, I got promoted into this role at the end of last year. And I swear my CEO was silent for a minute, literally a minute. It's almost like he was working out the numbers. He was like, how much is that going to affect our national insurance? I don't know what he was thinking, but he was literally, and I was like, don't speak, just don't speak. And I just waited. And eventually he came back and he said, how about X? And we sort of negotiated from there. So yeah, that's a good tip. Don't speak after you've said your number. I think going back to the beginning of the meeting, how I would introduce it, particularly if it's a promotion meeting and you've organized it, obviously say thank you, and then say you'd like to consider where your value is. If it's a performance review, make sure you don't just get feedback, but make room for yourself at the end of the meeting, where it's your opportunity and your manager's probably expecting it. They're not going to tee it up for you, but they are not going to be offended if you ask. So a phrase I often use is, I'd like to make sure your perception of where I'm adding value, my perception of where I'm adding value matches yours. And I'd like to make sure I'm being properly remunerated for that. And then you spell out maybe a few of the things that you've done, things that you will do. I think that just kind of reassures managers, particularly in this day and age, that you're going to stay longer. You know, you're looking to be a long-term employee. You're not just going to get the salary and run, to use it as like the baseline for a different company. And then say something like, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if I was on this number based on market rate and speaking to colleagues or friends at other companies, and then hold the silence.
Nice tip there as well, adding in what you plan to do in the next role as well, so they can see you being in their future plans. Do you, like Veronika, ask for more than your number is, or do you just say the number you want straight up out of interest?
I have, so the most recent one, the CEO made the initial offer, which was actually higher than the offer I was gonna initially counter with. So then I was like, just rejigging my numbers. Otherwise, yes, I have previously asked for like more than, it's a bit of a finger in the air one, and it's kind of based on what I need to, comfortably survive. I don't think there's a science. I haven't got like a science behind this. I think I often just give myself a bit of Dutch courage and say, let's add another 5 or add another 10, or I'm not particularly methodical there. So maybe someone else has a better approach to that than I do.
Nice. I've got a question here, and if anyone's got any as we go, just do pop them into the chat bit and we'll ask them. So question from Catherine. She's wondering, how can you start getting into strategy as well as writing? So if you kind of want to do a promotion to the side, how do you move on into that strategic role? Veronika?
Yeah, great point. I actually did exactly that at Sendable when I was starting out, because I was basically told what to write about. It was a lot for no reason, and it was really annoying me because I just saw all this wasted potential and focusing on quantity too much. I would say the number one tip I have for my past self, and for you if you're in that situation, is to start thinking about metrics and then really understanding them and seeing like what is driving what is driving the growth. What were the blogs that were delivering the highest number of new visitors? Which ones were the ones with the lowest bounce rate? Which ones were the ones that were more likely to create conversions? So, and actually most of the times those were in reverse. So we would have like a batch of blogs that were like top 10, and they were like taking almost 80% of the traffic, but then like there were these smaller blogs that had higher conversion rates than our pricing page for someone starting in trial, which was very odd, but it was there. So like you have to start thinking about the metrics and start to connect it to either sales for starting trials, like different kinds of conversion points. And when you can say that and bring it up at meetings, like, oh, we've done all of this, and I'm looking at like, this is average or this is better. How are we doing compared to previous year or previous quarter? Are we growing? Are we in decline? Experiment on something, maybe in your own time, maybe do a blog if they don't do blog updates, which I don't think that would happen. But let's say they're not doing something like promoting a content piece in a certain way, or they're not updating their blogs. Just do one sort of. I did mine in secret and then I just reported the results. You know what? I had a couple of free, hours. I did this, and look at the results that brought. How would you be happy for me to do a couple of more experiments? I'd be more than happy to bring those, to the team. We can decide which ones to work on. So like, just be like this contributor to the person that you're reporting to. And of course, this is also dependent on what the structure is. Like if you have someone who's in charge of content strategy at the company, it would be very bad if you'd start to go behind their backs. So you have to work with that person and see if you can learn from them. So that's a completely different approach. But like if you're the only content person, like for most of the companies, just start thinking about metrics, connect them again to different business goals and conversion points, and start having those conversations about growth and scalability, because those are the two things that leadership teams understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey, this is a new way how we could do this, and it would be faster and it would bring you better results. Everybody loves to have that conversation.
Yeah, amazing. And everyone loves metrics. Yeah. And what about you, James? Have you had a similar experience from going into more strategic?
Kind of. I think Veronika had a very well articulated description of how she would approach it. I think it reminds me of when I was first considering going into content marketing. I was actually in sales, and I spoke to someone who said, if you're going into an in-house role as a content marketer, don't think of yourself as a content writer, think of yourself as a content marketer. Because if you want to make that transition from what will initially probably be a mostly executional role, you might think of yourself as a writer, but you need to, I think, even if your job title is content writer, think of yourself as a content marketer and have a kind of broader commercial perspective. I think it will just remind you of what your position is, what your prospects are, that if you want to move into a more strategic role, you are thinking of yourself as a marketer, which has interactions with the sales team or the product team or the other channels. That's how I would approach it from a mindset. And then I think I can't really add anything on to what Veronika said about metrics. Think of the commercial value. That's what you're there for at the end of the day. Push that to the front.
Yeah, okay, excellent point. Thank you. And Veronika, I've got a question mainly that I think you could answer. How would you go about applying to UK-based roles if you live remotely? Basically, how do you get UK payment whilst living in Latvia, like yourself? How do you go about that?
Cool. I assume that you're asking how you can get a UK comparable salary while living in Latvia or a different place, because if you're living in a different country, you would have to set yourself up as a freelancer or be self-employed. I mean, I would recommend setting up a business and then paying yourself a salary. So it would be a slightly different approach to how you get billed to be essentially a contractor to a company that's remote, unless of course they have a Latvian office or they use a service like Oyster HR. I think there's like new services now that are helping you do that and get like full-time salary. But I would say that, well, it depends on your experience, right? And it depends on what you would like to pursue. I would say that because I've gone through a lot of hiring hiring for a content marketing specialist, and we really didn't care where they were from. And we actually ended up hiring a girl from Serbia. She's absolutely amazing. And she had only worked with Serbian companies. So what really made her stand out among all of the English native speaking people? She was a content marketer, true and true, not just a writer. She knew how to marry content with other channels. She understood a lot about promotion, and she had some experience working at an agency, which was really useful for us because that's our ICP. So I would say that if you want to apply, it doesn't matter, even US-based roles while working from Philippines, it doesn't really matter. What really matters is how relevant your experience is to the role. And if you have no relevant experience, like working in SaaS or fintech or any other industry that you might want to pursue, really do your best to create your own personal blog about that topic, for example. So if you were looking for a content marketing or content writer role, make sure that you have provable examples of your work and that people can see that you know what you're talking about. If you have that and you get, if you apply to these roles, and you customize your cover letter, especially if people ask for it, please do it. I am sure that the company will reach out to you and they will at least have a conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to move on to the freelancing portion of this, but if you have any final tips, Veronika and James, for any final words of wisdom for negotiating a good in-house salary, shoot.
I do. One thing I wanted to just get in there before we make the transition is because someone asked about objections in one of the earlier questions. And there are kind of just two things I wanted to mention. One is you can reframe it. So if they say, not £500,000 you're asking for and they give you 450, it's obviously unrealistic numbers. You can say, look, ideally we can avoid a situation where neither of us ends up getting what we want out of this. I think I'm meeting your expectations in this role, XYZ, and I'd hope that we can agree a figure that is the one that I feel comfortable with. If that still doesn't work, then a situation that I've been in is where the other person was surprised at how high I went. And I said, do you think I'm overvaluing myself? So it puts the onus on them to prove to you that you're overvaluing yourself. I think it was, again, I didn't invent that. I got a Reddit article, but I think it played very well because it really put my manager on the back foot. And I think it probably was a convincing response that meant he agreed to the salary that I was going for.
Right, that's a good question. Veronika, any final tip there?
I did have something extremely valuable, but I completely blanked. So no additional tips from me. I think just be very open. Like the sky is the limit, right? We live in the world where you can work from anywhere and be whoever you want. And I think there's a lot of value in you figuring that out before you go and like, obviously you can ask for a promotion if you want more money, but like really spend time figuring out what you want to do as your career, what you love, and then the money will follow. Obviously you have to research and do a lot of work before that. And there's a lot of sleepless nights, but yeah, just figure that out. And then a lot of other conversations become much simpler because for me, it's a much easier argument to say, it's my dream to like do this. I would love to do this at your company. People tend to be a lot more open to giving you the best possible, opportunity within their company if you have a good relationship with them. So that has been very powerful for me in my previous role that I wish I would do.
Yeah, for sure. Focusing on the stuff you actually love to do makes it all so much easier because you genuinely enjoy that work. Great. Thank you, Veronika and James, for all your tips on getting in-house salary increases. And I'll move over to Louise and Emma for freelance rate chat now. So starting off, when you first started out in freelancing, what do you wish you'd known about setting your freelance rates? Louise, start with you.
Well, you can charge more is probably the first thing. I think that's probably true of most freelancers. When you are your business, it does feel really scary to ask for money, especially if you're used to being in a job where you're paid a salary. Although listening to what James and Veronika are saying, that sounds way more stressful. But it is difficult having the conversations about money. So I think the first thing is that you probably can charge more than you realize. And the second thing is that you always have to have those conversations about money when you're speaking to new clients and not just think, oh, we had a nice conversation and we got on well, now I'll write the proposal and I'll sneak the price in there, because there's no point wasting your time doing that if you're never going to be a good fit. So yeah, I think those would definitely be the two things that I wish I knew when I started, and to try and avoid falling into the trap of, these content mills that are charging very, very low amounts. I know Emma has strong feelings about them. Yeah, I think looking at the surveys is a good idea, although I would say that can be tricky because we're all doing slightly different things. If I think about in the, the industry that I work in is health. So that could include writing content for a local yoga studio, or it could be writing content for a very, billion-pound biotech company. So the kind of content that you're going to be writing, the kind of budgets they're going to have, the kind of expertise and process that you'll use will vary so much. So I don't know that I look at the surveys that much. I mean, it's useful to see, but it doesn't always tell you how much you should be charging. So yeah, Emma, I'm sure you have more ideas on that.
I think the main thing for me really is learning not to charge per word or per hour, because then you get into a position where you are earning less because you've gotten really good and can do the job in half the time. You're actually taking a pay cut for improving at your job, and it's ridiculous. So I wish that I'd price things up per project or per task and tailored them per client. As Louise said, some people naturally require a lot more meetings, a lot more hand holding, a lot more research, and you need to kind of build that into the cost, or you end up losing out on all the ancillary tasks that you've done as part of that job. And some clients, they're smaller, but you love the work and you enjoy doing it, so you're happy to take a little bit less for them. So what I tend to do is make up rate cards for each client per project, per task that they have me do, and then kind of cap it at that, so it's nice for them. And that way you don't lose any money on the emails or the meetings or any of the research and any of that extra stuff. You're still making really good money, and it's consistent for them. They can budget for it because they know a blog post costs this amount, so you're making it super easy. And from their perspective, the relationship is really manageable, rather than kind of think, right, so it's a blog post, so how many hours did I spend on it? I don't feel like I can go over that, and if it's taken me longer today, I have to eat that cost because that's my fault that it took longer, when it usually, last time it cost this much, this time it cost that much. It gets to be a headache. So I wish I'd known that.
And Lucia says, obsessed with that as a tip, Emma. This is something I keep thinking I need to do. As for some topics where I have expertise, I can crack out great content quickly.
Or you could just still charge more for that and make money for your expertise. So
following on from what you've just said, Emma, when you come to pricing your things, Louise, what's your thoughts on projects versus per hour and how you approach that? Is it a similar thing that you do?
Yeah, it's similar. I think both approaches do work. I definitely prefer to charge by the project most of the time because that focuses on the overall value of the work, as Emma said, rather than focusing on how long you spend taking it, how long you spend doing the work. And it means that both you and the client know what to expect as well. You're not you don't have your eye on the clock all the time. You don't know at the end of the month what you're going to end up getting paid, and the client doesn't know either what's going to be on the invoice. So it just avoids any surprises. I do, and I like being able to just kind of do the work and not have an eye on the clock all the time. But that said, sometimes you do a project and you kind of have a feeling where there's going to be a bit of collaboration needed and a bit of back and forth, and you want to have a bit of flexibility built into the project. And so using a day rate, for example, can be a good way to do that. So for example, I do lots of white paper projects, and sometimes you don't always know what avenues you're going to go down. You might have a really nice plan at the start, but you interview someone and you find out some new information and you realize you want to do a section on that. And sometimes the project just changes as you go. Mm-hmm. If you have already set the total fee that you're going to get paid for it, you might be thinking, oh, this would be really good, but that's going to take me over the amount of time that I thought it would take, and that could put you off. Whereas if you are charging by the day, sometimes that can be a useful way just to offer a little bit more flexibility, and you're not panicking if the client wants to make more edits than you expected and all that kind of thing, because at the end of the day, you want the product to be as good as possible. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would suggest trying both and seeing what works for you, but generally definitely focus on value over time and never by the word.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, both of you sort of switch it up a bit depending on the client and project. When you're pricing for the project, how do you factor in all the extra things that you might have to do when you don't quite know how much research it's going to be or how much information they have for you? Like, how do you factor that in and approach that with the client?
Well, ideally, you could kind of get a good picture from those early introductory calls when you're kind of probing around and you're trying to figure out how much information do they already have, are they hoping to have these collaborative meetings, so you can kind of build out a good picture. I will always say add half a day onto it. Whatever it is that you've done, add half a day on, because you will be wrong every time. I've been doing it for 5 years. I'm always wrong. So what I try to do is learn from my past mistakes and kind of try to remember similar projects. And if I've been way off, account for that next time and just make sure that you've kind of always got an eye on that, really.
Mm-hmm. And when you are quoting for that project, do you list out, so you say one blog post is that, my research time is going to cost that, blah blah blah? Do you like list?
I do itemize the exact deliverables that they've asked for, because then later on, if they try and come in with scope creep, I can say, well, that's not included in the quote. I'm happy to do it. We can do it, for a fee of this. And then that's when the time element comes in, and you can kind of say, we'll do a half day or whatever, and we can kind of, for £50 an hour or whatever, we'll add these extra bits on. But I tend to kind of list out the exact deliverables that are included in that price. And then I'll say, this, of course, includes, one round of tweaks, one round of edits, you get, proofreading, the keyword research, and you kind of say that is what is included with the service. Mm-hmm. So they can see the value that they're getting as part of the quote, but you're not kind of niggling down, because then that invites people to kind of scrutinize and say, well, research doesn't take that long. And who are they to say? I'm the one that's writing it, I'll decide. Thanks. So if I take the time element out, it removes the quibbles from that.
Yeah, oh, that's nice. Yes, you've got some fixed deliverables there, but not as going into the nitty gritty at that point. What about you, Louise? Similar approach?
Yeah, I do the same thing. And funnily enough, the page of my proposal where I talk about pricing is called the nitty gritty. But yeah, I do the same thing. I set out exactly what the process is going to be so they can see exactly what is involved. So, website copywriting, that will include the research, messaging, all the keyword research, wireframing, all of that kind of thing. I wouldn't ever put a price or a time against each one, because as Emma says, I think that invites people to say, oh, we don't really need that bit. Whereas in order to do a good job, I think, yeah, we do need to do that. So there might be optional extras, and I might put them separately. And it can be helpful to do that if you want to give the client a couple of options. If you want to, you have your kind of Goldilocks service, and then you've got one that's like much more, all the bells and whistles and a bit more expensive, or maybe you have a really pared down version, but it doesn't sound like it's really going to be exactly what they need, so that they're going to choose the one in the middle. That could be a useful thing to do as well.
Oh, that's a great way of framing all the different ones.
Yeah.
I've got some questions coming through here. So from Anonymous, to increase rates, a good question. To increase rates, should one become better at their craft or better at selling / generating demand for their services?
Well, why not both? I mean, really. When you're freelance, your rate is whatever you say it is. It's whatever you feel comfortable to charge at the end of the day. If you can prove that you've got the value, and if the demand for your service is there, then you can charge what you want.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you always want to be improving the work that you're doing, just, out of professional pride, really, and to keep yourself challenged and enjoying your work. And I think you always need to make sure that you're delivering good work to your clients. So, you want to be under promising and over delivering, always being very proactive about your communication, being very clear about what the expectations are, and then always meeting them, just generally being easy to work with and reliable. So I think that has to be a given. But yeah, you do need to work on being able to sell it, and that is tricky as well. It's not always easy. So I think, I liked what James was saying about having, the little script in your mind of the things that you're going to say when you're on a call, so that you're not having the awkward silences where it wasn't deliberate. So if, you say your rate to a client and you've got that silence and you're waiting, sometimes I like to just say something like, is that what you were expecting? Does that make you fall off your seat? You can make it fun. It doesn't have to be this kind of really serious, scary thing, especially when you're working with clients who maybe don't work with copywriters or content writers all the time. They don't always know what the going rate is going to be. So they could ask three freelancers and get three completely different rates. So you really do have to do some work to explain why you are charging the amount you are. Yeah, I feel like I'm going around in circles. I hope that answered the question. It was a good question.
Definitely. And another anonymous question here. Have you ever had to overcome imposter syndrome when it comes to knowing your value and asking for the right remuneration, either salary for the in-house panelists or fees for the freelance panelists? And if so, how? Emma?
I mean, only every day. I've got a similar thing to what James mentioned earlier. I have a folder that I call my feel good folder, and it's where I keep all the screenshots of good feedback that I've had or nice comments. And whenever I'm feeling like, do you know what, who am I to ask for this amount, I go back through, have a look, and I'm like, yeah. Or I look at my portfolio and I think, look at all of these people that have paid me, these big brands. They're not idiots, they don't hand their budget over to complete noobs, so you've got to do that, really.
Yeah, this folder that you've both got, it sounds like a brilliant idea. Good little confidence booster like this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe to add to what both Louise and Emma have said, even if you are a noob, even if you are new to in-house role or freelancer role, you will know your strengths, or you should know your strengths in some capacity, whether that means in previous professional career or in your education, whatever stage you are in your marketing career. Script your strengths so that when you make the request, they're there. It's not like you're just piecing together, I think I'm good enough to ask for this. I mean, if you have a CV, I guess that's kind of part of that process, but yeah, just keep an eye on the fact that you have achieved things. Don't deny those achievements. And that's, I think, one way to reduce your feelings of imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
I think scripting is really good as well, because it helps you eradicate any of that hesitant language that will ultimately work against you when you're saying, oh, well, I think, I'm an aspiring that. If you have a script, you can cut all of that out and say, well, actually, I've done this, this, and this, and then do the silence that we all love.
Exactly.
Yeah, removing that hesitant language makes such a difference, approaching it with confidence, and also remembering there are people that are not as good at what you do as you are, and they're on a higher salary than you. I'm remembering that that's like a bit of fuel as well to get rid of that imposter syndrome.
I think just to add to that, I think, sorry. Yeah, just to add to that, I think another thing that I find really useful to remember is that the client's budget is not about me. And I try and be really really clinical about it, not emotional at all, not making it personal. These are my rates. I've already done all that mindset work. I've got my smile file, that's what I call it. You know, I've got the evidence of the work that I can do, and those are the rates, and I've worked it out. And if it doesn't suit the client, then that's fine. Like, you're not for everybody. And sometimes it just doesn't matter how good you are, how well you sell yourself. They may not have the budget, and nothing's going to change about that. So you have to try and detach yourself from taking that personally. They're not being rude. It's just kind of the way it is. And, you know, it's partly about finding the right market and the right fit for you. You know, if you are trying to sell a project for, I don't know, like £5,000, and the client that you're talking to doesn't want to pay for pro Zoom, then you're probably not going to be a good fit, and that's fine. Like, there will be other people that will work well together for them. So yeah, that would be another thing that I would add to that. It's not personal.
Yeah, that's a very reassuring way of looking at it. Detaching your emotions from the business needs.
Yeah, because also, so I've thought of another thing to add to that.
Yeah,
the clients are doing this too, right? They are also speaking to their customers and their clients. They will be having to either pitch their services or sell their products or whatever it is. They will be having to sell it. They will have to raise their prices. It's just part of doing business, really. Easier said than done.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to go through some questions that others have submitted before. Let's see what we've got here. How do you approach scope creep and charging for this?
Well, first, as I mentioned earlier, in your quote and in your writer's agreement, you will ideally have listed everything out meticulously, including what it involves and what it includes. So if somebody kind of comes in from the side and is like, oh, actually, can we, you know, add this? You can then say, yeah, absolutely. It's not included in the job spec that we've agreed, but I can do it for this price. Are you happy to go ahead? Because as soon as you allow that to go uncharged, you've set the precedent and you've buggered yourself, basically, and you're going to have to keep giving it for free forever because you can't start charging for that further on down the line. So always call it out when it happens and rely on those documents and those processes that you've set up in the beginning to kind of safeguard you, and always be helpful about it. Don't be a dick and be like, you know, we've not agreed that. Yeah, of course, that's great. I'd love to. It's more money for me. Yes, but, you know, it will be extra.
Yeah. Positive spin.
Yeah.
Louise, any thoughts on scope?
Yeah.
How you approach it?
Yeah, really similar. I think if you have a really clear contract that sets out exactly what's to be done by when and how much that will cost, then you can refer back to that anytime the client is looking for something extra. And sometimes there will be small changes that you're happy to absorb. So I think it's always a good idea to be charging enough to begin with so that you've got a little bit of flex. I think if you have undercharged and you're kind of resentful to begin with, then any little extra thing, you're going to be like, oh. So I think that's important to do from the start. And I think you can try and anticipate, you know, if you ask a lot of questions when you're first speaking to the client and you try and anticipate everything that could be needed, then hopefully most of it will be covered. I think you can put some clauses in your contract as well to cover certain things. So, for example, one of the ones that I have in my contract is a pause clause. So let's say a client wants to delay, they want to bring in a whole bunch of other people to review something and it's going to take ages. Then I have a pause clause that says I'll charge a certain amount extra if it's delayed beyond, you know, whatever the date is in the contract. And that means that's just to cover the extra time that I will now need to spend refamiliarizing myself with the project when we get back into it, and, you know, just kind of rejigging my calendar and all that sort of thing. But it's not, you know, like Emma says, we're not trying to be unreasonable here. It's just about trying to be practical, and it's about the logistics, really. And I've never actually had to use that. As soon as it's mentioned, it's suddenly everything speeds up again.
I'm going to use it from now on.
That's a great little clause.
I don't have one of those, but I'm getting it.
Yeah, adding that in. And Lucy's just said, I need to add a pause clause to my contract. Currently rejigging a start date that's been pushed back. And Jodie said, so smart, pause clause. I think everyone this week is going to be adding pause clause.
It wasn't my idea. I can't remember where I heard it. I've heard it called a restart fee as well. But, you know, things happen, and it's not the client's fault necessarily if something has to be put on hold for a bit, but that doesn't mean that you have to absorb that. So yeah, that's what that's there for.
Very good tip.
Veronika, hopefully there's a way that we can somehow get a clause in an in-house contract. That can be much better. You got the pension, you got the holidays, you got the job title.
Let us know if you figure that out. Question from Jody here. What's your favorite system/tool for administering your freelance work? Proposals, charging clients, potential client follow-up, etc. Louise, I know you love tools.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Your favorite system and tools for administering your freelance work?
As in speaking to new clients, finding clients?
Whether it's charging clients, proposals, and potential follow-ups from clients, anything to help manage your freelance day-to-day, basically. Are there any tools that you love to use that help you?
What tools do I use? I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. I really like Trello. That works well for me. So I've got, you know, the boards for new leads that have come in, and there's a timer that goes off, so I get a reminder when I need to follow that up. And then I've got, you know, current projects, retainers, and I kind of move them along the process for the project. That works quite well. I try to keep it very simple. I don't really use a whole lot. I mean, I use lots of tools, use Zoom, that kind of thing, Free Agent, HelloSign for proposals and contracts. But yeah, try to keep it as neat and tidy as possible.
Nice and simple. What about you, Emma?
I'm a massive Trello fan as well. I use kind of a similar system where I'm tracking everything and putting kind of deadlines on them so they're popping back up. I also like to snooze my emails because I'm really prone to context switching productivity loss. So if I can go through and kind of snooze all of those and have them pop back in when I need to be reminded, then I'll always do that. And for the other stuff, really, it's just I like to keep things quite manual, which isn't great in terms of billable hours and getting the most out of my day, but I'm very basic. I'm a basic woman, and I'm tech phobic, so I will avoid technology if I can. I'd be writing on a typewriter if I could, to be honest.
I use Mariana Kay from Freelance Bold. She's got like a project planning template. I can't remember how much it is, but it's like a Google Sheets template that just helps you track how much you're getting from each of your clients per month, checking off your invoices. So if you're just like rubbish like me at setting up Google Sheets, it's kind of just done for you. So I recommend that as well. Oh, I've just seen at the time we're actually 1 minute to 6, so that's gone very quickly. Are there any final tips, Louise and Emma, that you have?
Put your rates up.
We could run over a little bit more, but if you need to dash, we can do a few more minutes, because I think we started a bit after. Can you do 5 more minutes?
Yeah, I can do 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right, do a couple more questions. Okay, so question from Kate. Forget scope creep, I have scope coop. Long-standing client of 7 years, have only raised my rates once. Need to address this. Any tips for redefining a long-term client relationship that's got completely out of balance? Good question. Louise.
Yeah, that is a good question. It sort of depends on the situation. I think, like we've kind of touched on before, communication is really important. So I would try, if you can, not to let it stew. Otherwise, you know, it gets bigger in your mind. And sometimes it just takes a conversation and then you can sort it out. I think I've only really had one situation like that where I didn't feel like I was sticking to my boundaries properly. And when I had the conversation, it was actually fine, because I think most people want things to work out. Most people are nice. They don't want conflict. And most problems arise because we've got a difference in expectations, so it's usually a communication issue. So I think if you're able to have a conversation and let them know in advance that this is what you want to talk about, and just kind of get clear on what your expectations are and try and match them up. And it might not work out, but again, it doesn't have to be personal. This is my mantra.
Yeah. Good tip. Emma, same question to you there?
Yeah, I'm going to say a similar thing. I would probably suggest kind of a meeting to touch base about how things are going, and that way you can take feedback about how they feel and what they think that you could improve on, and kind of they have a chance then to, you know, readjust things with you and vice versa. Also, if you are undercharging this particular client. I think that next time you send an invoice, just kind of put in the email, you know, fair warning, I will be increasing my rates to this from this date. Let me know how you feel. If that's not okay, then, you know, maybe we can kind of arrange something or whatever. But by arrange something, I mean you still charge more money, they just get less of your service. And just kind of manage that expectation so that they know it's coming, and if they want to get out, then you can then offer, say, well, you know, I appreciate that it's not right for you, would you like me to put some names forward for some potential other writers that you could work with? And then you can go out to your network and say, hey guys, who wants, you know, this is what the budget is, this is what they want, and then you can give a list of names, and that way you can help your fellow freelancers, but also, you know, not look like a dick and leave your client in the lurch because they're cheap.
Yeah, that's a nice way of approaching it, still giving them the other options.
Yeah
Okay, so I will ease to an end now. Don't want to take up too much more of your time, but any final tips for negotiating your freelance rates? Final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I think you have to just be confident and just do it.
Yeah.
I think there's different ways to do it. You could do it once a year, twice a year. You could do it incrementally with each new project and avoid difficult conversations altogether. But, you know, just be confident, know what you want to say, have your evidence that you are worth charging that much and you feel confident about it, and just always have the conversation. Don't put off conversations about money.
Yeah, just lean into that discomfort and go for it with confidence.
Yeah, your freelance rate should scare you a bit. You should feel a bit nervous when you send it. And I think that the general rule is 20% of the people, of prospects, should turn you down for being too expensive. I think that's what the rule is. So if everybody is saying yes and you feel completely comfortable, definitely put your rates up because you're not charging enough.
Very true. Yeah. That's a good baseline, 20%. Awesome. Thank you very much to all of you for all your brilliant and practical tips there. Hope everyone listening has got something from that, and you can go and ask for what you are worth and deserve. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a good evening.
Bye.